Mother Bear found a human baby at a traffic accident. What she did put everyone in tears. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Every bit of your support helps us create even more amazing stories for you. The gentle light of dawn was just beginning to filter through the dense trees that lined the winding mountain road. A soft mist hung in the air, making the forested landscape seem almost otherworldly in its quietude. This peaceful stretch of highway that cut through Black Ridge National Forest was typically deserted at 5:30 in the morning, a time when most humans were still nestled in their beds, and the forest belonged to its wild inhabitants. Among these inhabitants was Maple, a cinnamon-colored mother bear who had recently emerged from her winter den with 2 small cubs. The trio had been foraging near the road's edge, with Maple teaching her young ones how to overturn logs in search of grubs and insects. Her acute senses were always alert for danger, the sound of approaching vehicles or the scent of humans, as she guided her cubs through their morning routine. The serenity of the forest morning shattered in an instant. The screech of tires against asphalt pierced the air, followed by the sickening sound of metal twisting and glass shattering. A blue sedan had taken the curve too fast, skidding on the damp road before careening off the pavement and slamming into a massive oak tree. The impact was thunderous, sending birds scattering from nearby branches and causing Maple to rear up protectively in front of her cubs. Connor Reynolds had been driving through the night, desperate to reach his sister's home after receiving news that she had gone into early labor. His wife Lily sat beside him, her head resting against the window as she dozed fitfully. In the back seat, secured in his car seat, their 6-month-old son Noah slept peacefully, unaware of the urgency that had prompted this pre-dawn journey. The moment Connor felt the car begin to hydroplane on the wet asphalt, time seemed to slow. He remembered gripping the steering wheel, trying to regain control, and hearing Lily's startled cry. Then came the impact, violent and unforgiving, and blackness. Maple's first instinct was to retreat deeper into the forest with her cubs. The crash had occurred less than 50 yards from where they had been foraging, and danger often followed such human disturbances. She hustled her cubs behind a dense thicket and made soft, grunting sounds, instructing them to stay put. But something else reached her sensitive ears, a high-pitched wailing unlike anything she had heard before. It wasn't the call of any forest creature she knew, yet something about it tugged at her maternal instincts. Cautiously, the mother bear emerged from the protection of the trees. Her nose twitched as she scented the air. Burning rubber, hot metal, spilled gasoline, and blood. The human vehicle lay crumpled against the tree, its front end accordioned into half its original size. Steam hissed from the damaged engine. Through the shattered rear window, Maple could see movement, and the crying sound grew louder. The bear approached with extreme caution, her powerful muscles tensed to flee at the first sign of threat. As she circled the wreckage, she saw 2 human forms in the front seats, motionless and silent. The man's head rested against the deployed airbag, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. The woman's body was awkwardly angled, her arm bent in an unnatural position. But it was in the back seat that Maple found the source of the crying. A tiny human infant, still strapped into his car seat, face red with distress, and tiny fists flailing against the confines of his safety harness. The seat had partially dislodged from its base during impact, but had done its job of protecting its precious cargo. Maple stood on her hind legs, her massive 7-foot frame towering over the wrecked vehicle as she peered inside. The baby's cries momentarily ceased as his teary eyes fixed on the enormous creature now staring at him. For a heartbeat, bear and human infant regarded each other, 2 souls connected by a strange moment in time. Then the car shuddered, settling deeper into its crumpled state, and a new smell reached Maple's sensitive nose. The gasoline leak was growing stronger. The infant resumed his terrified wails, somehow sensing the precarious nature of his situation even if he couldn't understand it. Maple dropped back to all fours and circled the vehicle once more, her agitation growing as she processed the danger. Her own cubs waited in the forest, yet she couldn't bring herself to leave this helpless human cub in peril. With each passing second, the scent of gasoline grew more pronounced, and a faint crackling sound began to emerge from the car's mangled engine compartment. The mother bear's mind was a storm of conflicting instincts. Every fiber of her being urged her to return to her cubs, to protect her own blood. Yet something powerful and inexplicable kept her rooted to this spot, a connection she couldn't understand but couldn't ignore. Perhaps it was the memory of her own first cub, lost to a harsh winter 2 seasons ago, or simply the universal language of a child in distress that transcended the boundaries between species. A soft moan escaped from the woman in the passenger seat. Lily's eyelids fluttered as consciousness returned in painful waves. The first thing she registered was the stabbing pain in her left arm, followed by the disorienting tilt of the world around her. Her vision swam in and out of focus as she tried to make sense of what had happened. Then, with sudden clarity, a mother's instinct cut through the fog of pain and confusion. "Noah," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She turned her head slowly, wincing as pain shot down her neck, desperate to see her baby. What she saw instead made her blood run cold. Through the spiderweb of cracks in her window, Lily found herself staring directly into the dark, intelligent eyes of an enormous brown bear. Panic seized her chest, momentarily stealing her breath. The bear was less than 3 feet away, its massive head level with her window. Behind her, Noah continued to cry, each wail seeming to intensify as if he sensed his mother's fear. "Connor," Lily croaked, reaching out with her good arm to shake her husband, but he remained motionless, blood now pooling on his collar. The realization that she was alone in this nightmare, trapped in a wrecked car with her baby and a wild bear, sent waves of terror and helplessness washing over her. But something about the bear's behavior gave Lily pause. It wasn't behaving aggressively, it wasn't trying to break into the car. Instead, it seemed concerned. The animal's eyes kept darting between her and the back seat where Noah cried. Then it looked pointedly at the hood of the car, where wisps of dark smoke had begun to curl from beneath the crumpled metal. The bear suddenly reared up and brought its paws down on the rear door of the car, causing the entire vehicle to shake. Lily screamed, certain that the attack she had feared was beginning. But instead of tearing at the metal, the bear hooked its claws into the already damaged frame of the rear door and pulled. The door, weakened by the impact of the crash, groaned in protest before tearing partially free of its hinges. Now, Lily understood with crystal clarity. The car was going to catch fire. The bear wasn't a threat, it was somehow trying to help. "Noah," she called out, twisting in her seat despite the pain that tore through her injured arm. "Noah, baby, it's okay." But it wasn't okay. She couldn't reach him. Her seatbelt was jammed, and when she tried to release it with her one functioning arm, white-hot pain caused her vision to momentarily blacken around the edges. Outside, the first tongue of flame licked upward from beneath the hood. In that moment, Maple made her decision. With surprising gentleness for a creature of such power, she used her teeth and claws to widen the opening she had created in the rear door. The metal gave way more easily than she expected, and she was able to reach the car seat where the human infant continued to wail. The scent of the child filled her nostrils. Milk and powder, and that indefinable smell that all babies seem to share, regardless of species. With extreme delicacy, Maple closed her jaws around the plastic handle of the car seat, feeling it give slightly but hold firm under her bite. She began to back away, pulling the seat with her. Inside the car, Lily watched in astonishment and terror as the bear began to drag her son's car seat out of the vehicle. "No!" she screamed, fighting against her restraints with renewed desperation. "Please, my baby." But her pleas went unheeded as the car seat, with Noah securely strapped inside, disappeared from her view. Maple dragged the car seat several yards away from the vehicle, setting it down carefully on a patch of soft grass. The infant's cries had reduced to whimpers, his wide blue eyes fixed on the massive creature looming over him. Maple sniffed him thoroughly, confirming he was uninjured, then turned her attention back to the car. The flames were spreading now, crawling along the underside of the vehicle. The smell of burning oil and plastic filled the air. Maple approached the passenger side, where she had seen the female human move. This would be more difficult. Extracting a full-grown human required strength and precision that even her powerful body might not manage. As she contemplated this new challenge, the distant sound of an approaching engine reached her sensitive ears. Another human vehicle was coming. Maple hesitated, torn between her desire to help and her instinctive fear of multiple humans. The decision was made for her when a large pickup truck rounded the bend and screeched to a halt at the site of the accident. James Thornton had been making his regular early morning drive to his job at the ranger station when he spotted the smoking wreck ahead. What he saw next made him question his sanity. A huge brown bear standing beside the crashed car, with what appeared to be a baby carrier several yards away on the grass. "What in God's name?" he muttered, reaching for his phone to call for emergency services. As he did, the bear turned to look directly at him, their eyes meeting in a moment of inexplicable connection. Then, with surprising speed for her size, the bear lumbered toward the baby carrier, stood protectively over it for a brief second, and then retreated toward the tree line. James didn't waste another moment. He called 911 as he jumped from his truck and raced toward the smoking car, the dispatcher's voice tinny in his ear. "There's been an accident on Black Ridge Forest Road, about 15 miles east of the ranger station," he reported breathlessly. "Car versus tree, vehicle on fire, at least 2 adults trapped. And ma'am, you won't believe this, but there's a baby in a car seat that looks like it was pulled from the wreck by a bear." "Sir, did you say a bear?" The dispatcher's incredulous voice crackled through the phone. "Yes, a bear. The animals retreated to the woods now, but the baby appears unharmed." James reached the car and peered through the passenger window, where he could see a woman struggling weakly against her seatbelt. "I need fire and rescue here now. The car is about to be fully engulfed." From the safety of the forest edge, Maple watched as the human male retrieved the infant from the car seat and then returned to the burning vehicle, attempting to open the doors. More vehicles began to arrive. First a police car with flashing lights, then another civilian truck whose driver immediately joined the rescue efforts. In the distance, the wail of sirens announced the approach of more help. Maple's cubs had remained hidden as she had instructed, but now they whimpered for her attention. With one last look at the unfolding human drama, she turned and disappeared into the underbrush, reuniting with her young ones and leading them deeper into the forest's protective embrace. By the time the fire truck and ambulances arrived, James and the other Good Samaritan, a construction worker named Mike Jensen, had managed to extract Lily from the passenger seat. Connor proved more difficult to reach, the driver's side of the car having taken the brunt of the impact. The firefighters worked quickly, using the jaws of life to cut through the mangled door, while paramedics stabilized Lily on a stretcher nearby. "My baby," Lily kept saying, her voice hoarse with smoke and emotion. "Where's my baby?" "He's safe, ma'am," a young female paramedic assured her, gesturing to where another medical worker was examining Noah. "Not a scratch on him. It's a miracle." "The bear," Lily whispered, her words slurring as shock and pain medication began to take effect. "A bear saved him. A mother bear." The paramedic exchanged glances with her colleague, both clearly assuming the woman was delirious from her injuries and the trauma of the accident. "Just rest now," she soothed. "Your little boy is fine." As the rescue workers finally freed Connor from the wreckage and rushed both parents into waiting ambulances, Fire Chief Robert Madsen approached James, who was still trying to process what he had witnessed. "Did I hear right? Something about a bear?" the chief asked, removing his helmet and wiping sweat from his brow. The car was now fully engulfed in flames, but the firefighters had it under control, a steady stream of water reducing the blaze to sizzling smoke. James nodded, pointing to the car seat that still lay on the grass where Maple had left it. "I saw it with my own eyes, Chief. When I arrived, that bear was standing right there, and it had somehow pulled the baby seat clear of the wreck. I know how it sounds, but I swear that's what happened." The chief's skeptical expression softened as he noticed something on the ground near the car seat. Bending down, he examined what appeared to be a set of large paw prints in the soft earth, alongside drag marks that led from the wrecked car. "I'll be damned," he murmured. Word of the incredible rescue spread quickly among the emergency personnel on scene. A state wildlife officer who had been called as a precaution examined the evidence with growing amazement. "It's unprecedented," Officer Sarah Collins stated, photographing the paw prints and the clear drag marks leading from the car to where the car seat had been found. "Bears typically avoid human contact at all costs, and they certainly don't exhibit this kind of behavior. This doesn't make scientific sense, but the evidence is right here." As the last of the emergency vehicles prepared to leave, a small crowd of locals had gathered at the roadside, drawn by the sirens and the spreading rumors of what had occurred. Among them was an elderly Native American man named Joseph Running Bear, who had lived in the area his entire life. "Your science may not have an explanation," he said quietly to Officer Collins, "but our stories do. We have always known that the spirits of the forest watch over this land. Sometimes they choose to reveal themselves in ways that remind us of the connections between all living things." Joseph gazed toward the forest, where Maple and her cubs had disappeared. That mother bear recognized another mother's child in danger. The bond of motherhood is one of the strongest forces in nature. It can bridge the gap between species, between worlds. The story of the guardian bear of Black Ridge Forest would soon spread far beyond the local community, first appearing in the regional newspaper under the headline, "Mother Bear Rescues Infant from Burning Car, Witnesses in Tears." At first, many dismissed it as sensationalism or a rural legend, but the testimonies of James Thornton, the emergency responders, and the evidence documented by Officer Collins lent undeniable credibility to the account. 3 days after the accident, Lily Reynolds sat in her hospital room, her arm in a cast and her body still sore from the impact, but her eyes clear and focused as she recounted her experience to a small group that included Officer Collins, Chief Madsen, and a reporter from the national news. "I saw the bear look at the engine where the fire was starting, and then it looked at Noah," she explained, her voice steady despite the emotion that made her eyes glisten. "There was intelligence there, understanding. It knew we were in danger, and it chose to help." Connor, who had suffered a severe concussion and several broken ribs but was expected to make a full recovery, sat beside his wife's bed, little Noah sleeping peacefully in his arms. "I don't remember the accident or the bear," he admitted, "but I know that without that animal's intervention, our son wouldn't be here. The fire investigators said the car was completely engulfed less than 2 minutes after the last person was pulled free. The Reynolds family's story touched hearts across the nation, prompting discussions about animal intelligence, compassion across species boundaries, and the mysterious connections that might exist in nature beyond human understanding. Wildlife experts debated possible explanations. Perhaps the bear had recently lost cubs and was responding to a displaced maternal instinct, or maybe it had previous positive interactions with humans that had overcome its natural wariness. Whatever the scientific explanation, the emotional impact of the story was undeniable. Donations poured in for the Reynolds family to cover their medical expenses, and a local conservation group established the Maples Fund, named after the bear by local schoolchildren, to support research and protection efforts for the region's bear population. A month after the accident, when the Reynolds family had recovered enough to return home, they made a special trip back to Blackridge Forest. With the assistance of wildlife officials, they placed a small, unobtrusive plaque near the site of the accident. It read simply, "In this place, on a spring morning, the boundaries between species fell away, and a mother's love revealed itself in its purest form. With eternal gratitude to the guardian of Blackridge." As they stood there, baby Noah cradled in his mother's arms, a hushed silence fell over the small gathering. Lily could have sworn she felt a presence watching from deep within the forest. Not threatening, but protective, connected. And deep in the heart of Blackridge Forest, Maple continued to teach her cubs the ways of survival, unaware of the profound impact her actions had made on the human world. To her, it had been a simple choice, one mother helping another's child. In that moment of crisis, the complicated history between bears and humans had dissolved, leaving only the most fundamental truth of all: that compassion knows no boundaries, and sometimes the most powerful connections are those that need no words to be understood. 6 months passed, the vibrant greens of spring and summer giving way to the fiery palette of autumn. The story of the guardian bear of Blackridge had faded from national headlines, becoming instead a cherished local legend, often recounted around campfires and in the cozy confines of the town's only coffee shop, the Forest Brew. The Reynolds family had healed well. Connor had returned to his job as an architectural engineer, though he now worked primarily from home to spend more time with his family. Lily had used her recovery period to finish the children's book she'd been writing for years, inspired now by the remarkable events that had saved her son's life. The Mother Bear's Gift was scheduled for publication in the spring, with proceeds dedicated to wildlife conservation efforts. Little Noah, now a year old, was taking his first tentative steps, his chubby hands grasping furniture as he wobbled across the living room floor. Though he was far too young to remember the accident, his parents had already begun telling him the story of his miraculous rescue, determined that he would grow up with a deep respect for the natural world and the unexpected guardian who had ensured he would have a future. What the Reynolds family didn't know, what no one knew, was that Maple's actions that fateful morning had set in motion a series of events that would once again bring bears and humans into unprecedented proximity. Wildlife biologist Dr. Elena Vasquez had been studying the bear populations of Blackridge National Forest for over a decade. She had radio-collared several bears in the region, including a cinnamon-colored female she had designated as BF-42, unaware that this was the same bear locals now reverently called Maple. When the story of the bear rescue first broke, Elena had been skeptical, attributing it to human tendency to anthropomorphize animal behavior. But as she reviewed her tracking data from that morning, she discovered something remarkable. BF-42 had indeed been present at the exact location of the accident, exactly when witnesses claimed the rescue had occurred. Intrigued and determined to understand what might have motivated such unprecedented behavior, Elena intensified her study of BF-42 and her cubs. Through her observation, blinds, and trail cameras, she documented behaviors that gradually forced her to reconsider her scientific assumptions. This bear showed unusual comfort with human proximity, not in the worrisome way of food-conditioned bears, but rather in a manner that suggested genuine curiosity without fear. It challenges everything we think we understand about ursine cognition and behavior, Elena explained to her research team as they reviewed footage of Maple methodically moving her cubs away from a hiking trail before hikers appeared, something that suggested not just avoidance but anticipation and planning. There's growing evidence that BF-42 may represent a level of adaptive intelligence we haven't previously documented in North American bears. As autumn deepened, the region was hit by an unprecedented drought. Streams ran dry, berry bushes withered, and forest animals struggled to find sufficient food to prepare for the coming winter. In the scientific community, alarm bells were ringing. Bears entering hibernation without adequate fat reserves might not survive until spring, particularly mothers with cubs to nourish. Elena's tracking data showed that Maple and her cubs were traveling farther than usual in search of food, often approaching dangerously close to human settlements on the outskirts of Blackridge Town. Other bears were doing the same, creating a potentially dangerous situation for both humans and bears. "We're looking at a perfect storm for human-bear conflict," she warned at an emergency meeting with forest rangers and local officials. "Hungry bears, depleted natural food sources, and an increasing number of bears associating human areas with potential food." Chief Ranger Marcus Holloway nodded grimly. "We've already had 3 incidents this week. Bears breaking into garbage cans behind the supermarket, another one getting into a chicken coop out on Oak Ridge Road. It's only a matter of time before someone gets hurt, either a person or a bear." The situation came to a head on a crisp October afternoon. 9-year-old Emma Thornton, James Thornton's daughter, was playing in her backyard on the forested edge of town while her father split firewood nearby. The family's golden retriever, Rusty, had been dozing in the autumn sunshine but suddenly leapt to his feet, hackles raised as he stared intently at the tree line. James looked up from his work, instantly alert. "Emma, come here," he called, trying to keep his voice casual while his eyes scanned the forest edge. Emma, absorbed in her leaf collection, didn't immediately respond. That's when James saw them. 3 bears emerging from the trees not 30 yards from where his daughter knelt. His heart hammered against his ribs as he recognized the largest of the 3. A cinnamon-colored mother bear with 2 half-grown cubs. It was unmistakably the same bear he had seen at the accident site. What had Elena called her in the reports? BF-42. Maple. "Emma," he said again, his voice tight with forced calm. "Walk slowly to me, honey, don't run." Emma finally looked up, her collection of brilliantly colored leaves fluttering from her hands as she saw the bears. To James's horror, she didn't move toward him but remained frozen in place, her eyes wide. Rusty, always protective of Emma, began barking furiously, charging toward the bears in a display of canine bravery that made James's blood run cold. The last thing they needed was to provoke the bears further. "Rusty, no!" he shouted, but it was too late. The dog was racing toward the bears, placing himself between them and Emma, his barks echoing through the yard. James snatched up the axe he'd been using and started forward, not sure what he could do against 3 bears but determined to reach his daughter. Then something happened that stopped him in his tracks. The mother bear, Maple, rose briefly on her hind legs, towering over the barking dog. James expected her to charge, to swat the dog aside with one powerful blow. Instead, she dropped back to all fours and made a strange huffing sound to her cubs. The young bears immediately retreated several steps. Then, to James's amazement, Maple herself backed away slowly, her eyes never leaving Emma. It was as if she recognized the situation for what it was, another mother's child potentially in danger, another moment where species boundaries might dissolve in favor of understanding. Emma, unfrozen at last, scrambled to her feet and ran to her father, burying her face against his side. Rusty, emboldened by the bear's retreat, continued his barking tirade until James called him sharply back. "Easy, boy," he soothed, one arm around Emma, the other hand gripping the dog's collar. "They're leaving, it's okay." And they were leaving, the three bears melting back into the forest as quietly as they had appeared. Just before Maple disappeared completely, she paused, looking back at James with an expression he would later struggle to describe to Elena Vasquez's research team. It wasn't aggression, he insisted. It wasn't fear either. It was awareness, like she remembered me from before, like she was making a choice. The incident at the Thornton property sparked a new wave of interest in the remarkable bear. Local media ran features on Maple, the bear who saves children, leading to an influx of tourists hoping to catch a glimpse of the famous bear. This, coupled with the drought conditions and food scarcity, created a dangerous situation that Elena and the Forest Service raced to address. "We have visitors deliberately leaving food out, hoping to attract Maple," Elena explained in frustration during an emergency town meeting. "They don't understand they're putting her at risk. A fed bear is a dead bear. Once they associate humans with food, they lose their natural caution. It typically ends with the bear being euthanized after a dangerous encounter." Joseph Running Bear, now consulting with Elena's research team to provide indigenous perspectives on bear behavior and conservation, stood to address the packed community center. "For generations, my people have understood bears as our kin. Teachers and medicine bringers, not trophies or attractions," he said, his weathered face solemn in the harsh fluorescent lighting. "This bear you call Maple has shown wisdom beyond what many believed possible. Now we must show our own wisdom in return." With input from Joseph and other community elders, a comprehensive conservation plan was developed. The Forest Service would close certain areas of the forest to give the bears undisturbed access to remaining food sources. Community members organized a massive effort to clear brush around homes at the forest edge, reducing habitat for the rodents and small animals that might attract predators. Most importantly, a strict education campaign was launched to ensure that no one, resident or visitor, left out food or garbage that might draw bears into dangerous proximity with humans. Winter arrived early that year, a blessing after the long drought. Heavy snows blanketed the forest, and the bears of Blackridge finally retreated to their dens for hibernation. Elena's tracking data confirmed that Maple and her cubs had established a winter den deep in the protected zone of the forest, far from human activity. "She made it," Elena announced with relief at the final Conservation Committee meeting of the year. "Her collar shows her heart rate and body temperature have dropped to hibernation levels. She and the cubs should be safe until spring." What no one could have predicted was that the winter would bring its own unprecedented challenges. In January, a massive ice storm swept through the region, downing power lines and leaving the town of Blackridge without electricity for almost 2 weeks. The temperature plummeted to record lows, transforming the town into a landscape of crystalline beauty and deadly cold. The Reynolds family, like many others, struggled to keep their home warm enough for safety. When pipes began to freeze despite their best efforts, Connor made the difficult decision to take Lily and Noah to the emergency shelter that had been established in the town's high school gymnasium. The shelter was crowded but well organized, with volunteers distributing blankets and hot meals to displaced townspeople. The Reynolds found space in a corner, setting up their temporary home on gymnasium mats. Noah, now an active toddler, was initially delighted by the adventure. But as days passed and temperatures in the shelter fluctuated, he developed a persistent cough that gradually worsened to concerning levels. "He's burning up," Lily worried, placing a hand on Noah's forehead as he fitfully dozed in the makeshift bed. "Connor, I think we need to get him to the medical station." The volunteer doctor confirmed their fears. Noah had developed pneumonia, a dangerous condition for a child so young. "He needs to be at the regional hospital," Dr. Martinez explained, her face grave. "The roads to town are still impassable by regular vehicles, but I've called for a medical transport with the snow chains." The wait for the medical transport stretched from hours into a day as the vehicle struggled through ice-blocked roads. Noah's condition deteriorated rapidly, his breathing becoming labored, his little body racked with coughing spells that left him exhausted and barely responsive. "We can't wait any longer," Connor decided, desperation clear in his voice. "I'm going to try to reach the hospital myself. My truck has four-wheel drive. It might make it." "It's too dangerous," James Thornton, who had been helping coordinate the shelter's emergency response, warned. "The roads are like glass. Even with four-wheel drive, you'd be risking all your lives." "We're already risking his life by waiting," Lily countered, tears streaming down her face as she clutched her fevered son. In that moment of crisis, Joseph Running Bear approached the distraught parents, his expression thoughtful. "There may be another way," he said quietly. "An old logging road through the forest. It's narrower, less traveled, and winds through protected valleys where the ice shouldn't be as bad." James looked doubtful. "That road hasn't been maintained in years. It's probably completely blocked with fallen trees after the storm." "I checked it yesterday," Joseph replied. "I was concerned about the same thing, so I snowshoed the first few miles. It's passable. Difficult, but passable. And it would cut almost 40 minutes off the journey to the hospital." The decision was made quickly. Connor and Lily bundled Noah in every blanket they could find. James insisted on coming with them, his knowledge of the forest potentially crucial if they encountered trouble. Elena Vasquez, who had been helping coordinate wildlife concerns during the emergency, also volunteered to join them, bringing medical supplies from the shelter's first aid station. The small convoy, Connor's truck leading, followed by James's more robust Forest Service vehicle, set out as the winter afternoon began its early fade toward dusk. The logging road was indeed passable, though barely. Massive pine trees towered on either side, their branches heavy with ice that glittered in the waning light. The trucks crept forward at barely 15 miles per hour, every bump and dip causing Noah to whimper in pain. "How much farther?" Lily asked, her voice thin with worry as she cradled Noah in the back seat. Elena, sitting beside her to monitor the child's condition, checked the GPS on her phone. "About 7 more miles to the main highway," she replied. "From there, it should be easier going to the hospital." Their slow progress was suddenly halted by a loud crack that echoed through the forest. Ahead of them, an ice-laden tree began to tip, its massive trunk groaning as it descended directly into the narrow road. Connor slammed on the brakes, the truck sliding slightly on the icy surface before coming to a stop mere yards from where the tree crashed down, completely blocking their path. "No," Lily whispered, her face pale in the gathering darkness. "No, no, no." James was already out of his vehicle, assessing the fallen pine with a forester's experienced eye. "It's too big," he called back. "There's no way we can move it, and there's not enough space to get around it on either side. Connor joined him, desperation written across his features. We have to do something. Noah's getting worse by the minute. As the men debated their options, Elena's attention was caught by something moving in the forest to their right. A flash of cinnamon brown against the white snow, then another smaller one. She stiffened, recognizing the distinctive radio collar even in the dim light. "It's BF-42, she said softly, touching Lily's arm. "It's Maple." Lily looked up, following Elena's gaze, her eyes widening as she saw the mother bear and one of her cubs standing at the forest edge, watching them intently. What is she doing here? Shouldn't she be hibernating? Elena's scientific mind raced through possibilities. The fallen tree must have disturbed her den. They sometimes relocate midwinter if there's a disturbance. She frowned, concerned. But she shouldn't be active like this. It burns precious energy reserves they need to survive until spring. The bear took several steps closer to the vehicles, her movements deliberate. The men, now aware of her presence, froze in place. "Nobody move," James cautioned, well versed in bear safety protocols. "Just let her pass." But Maple wasn't passing by. To everyone's astonishment, she approached the fallen tree, sniffing along its length as if assessing the obstacle. Then, with one powerful motion, she reared up and brought her weight down on one of the smaller branches, breaking it free. "Is she helping?" Connor whispered, hardly daring to believe what they were witnessing. Elena shook her head in amazement. "I've never seen anything like this. It defies everything we understand about bear behavior." For nearly 20 minutes, the humans watched in silent awe as Maple methodically broke away, branch after branch, from the fallen pine. Her cub joined in, mimicking her actions, the two bears clearing a path just wide enough for a vehicle to potentially squeeze through. When the path was cleared, Maple backed away several yards and sat on her haunches, watching the humans expectantly. The message was unmistakable. The way was open. "This can't be happening," Elena murmured, her scientific worldview crumbling in the face of such inexplicable behavior. Joseph, who had remained silent throughout the encounter, finally spoke. "When we are open to the lessons of the natural world, we often discover that our understanding has barely scratched the surface. This bear has chosen to help this child not once, but twice. These are not coincidences." Connor carefully eased his truck forward, navigating the narrow path between the trunk of the fallen pine and the snow-covered embankment. As they passed the point where Maple sat watching, Lily rolled down her window despite the cold, tears freezing on her cheeks as she looked directly at the bear who had once again intervened in their son's life. "Thank you," she whispered, the words inadequate for the depth of emotion behind them. The bear's dark eyes met hers for a brief moment before she turned and disappeared into the forest with her cub, their silhouettes quickly swallowed by the growing darkness and swirling snow. Noah made it to the hospital just in time. The doctors later confirmed that without immediate medical intervention, the pneumonia would likely have claimed his life. As he gradually recovered in the pediatric ward, the story of his second miraculous rescue by the same bear spread through the hospital and beyond, eventually reaching media outlets across the country. Wildlife experts and behavioral scientists descended on Black Ridge, eager to study what many were now calling the most extraordinary case of interspecies altruism ever documented. Elena found herself at the center of a scientific storm, her research into BF-42, suddenly the focus of intense scrutiny and debate. "We're dealing with an evolutionary anomaly," insisted Dr. Maxwell Reed, a prominent behavioral ecologist who had flown in from the University of Washington. This bear has somehow developed higher cognitive functions and empathetic responses that we've never before observed in ursids. Other scientists suggested more pragmatic explanations. Perhaps the bear had been raised in captivity and released, or had undergone human habituation that had fundamentally altered her natural fear responses. Some dismissed the entire story as exaggeration or coincidence, despite the multiple reliable witnesses. Through it all, Elena continued her methodical research, determined to understand the truth about Maple without exploitation or sensationalism. She was joined in her efforts by Joseph Running Bear, whose traditional knowledge provided context and perspectives that Western science had often overlooked. In our stories, Joseph explained as they reviewed new footage of Maple emerged from hibernation in early spring, bears are not just animals, but teachers and medicine bringers. They show us how to live in harmony with the earth, how to be strong yet gentle, fierce yet compassionate. Spring brought new life to Blackridge Forest. The drought had broken, streams ran full with snowmelt, and berry bushes budded with the promise of abundant food. Maple and her now yearling cubs emerged from their relocated den, thinner after the disrupted hibernation but otherwise healthy. The Reynolds family, determined to honor the bear who had twice saved their son's life, worked with Elena and the Forest Service to establish a permanent protected zone around Maple's known territory. They also founded the Blackridge Wildlife Corridor Initiative, a nonprofit dedicated to creating safe passages for wildlife across human-developed areas. Noah will grow up knowing that his life was saved by a wild creature many people would fear, Lily explained during the initiative's launch event, her now healthy son balanced on her hip. We want him, and all children, to grow up in a world where we recognize our deep connections to the natural world, where we protect rather than destroy, where we seek understanding instead of dominance. The story of Maple, the bear, continued to unfold in ways that challenged scientific understanding. Her interactions with humans remained selective and purposeful. She avoided crowds, but would occasionally allow Elena's research team to observe her from a respectful distance. She taught her cubs both traditional bear behaviors and her own unique approach to human encounters, creating what Elena began to describe as a new cultural tradition within this small bear lineage. 5 years after the accident that had first brought Maple into human awareness, Noah Reynolds celebrated his 6th birthday with a special trip. Accompanied by his parents, Elena, James Thornton and his daughter Emma, Joseph Running Bear, and a small documentary film crew, he visited a specially constructed blind at the edge of Maple's protected territory. "Will she remember me?" Noah asked, his voice hushed with anticipation as they settled into the camouflaged structure. "Bears have excellent memories," Elena explained gently. "But remember, she's a wild animal, and we're here to observe respectfully, not to interact." They waited in silence for nearly 3 hours. The adults had begun to think the day would end in disappointment when Joseph quietly pointed to a movement at the forest edge. There she was, Maple, now an older and more massive bear, her radio collar long since removed as part of Elena's evolving ethical protocols. Behind her came 2 nearly grown cubs from her newest litter, cautious but curious. As the humans watched in breathless silence, Maple approached a clearing where Elena's team had established a research station months earlier. She paused, lifting her head to scent the air, her keen nose detecting the humans hidden in the blind. For a long moment she stood perfectly still, gazing directly at the structure as if she could see through its camouflage. Then, in a gesture that brought tears to the eyes of everyone present, she rose briefly on her hind legs, exactly as she had done that first morning by the wrecked car, before dropping back to all fours and continuing on her way, cubs in tow, Noah, his eyes wide with wonder, looked up at his mother. She said hello, he whispered with the simple certainty of a child. Lily hugged her son close, her throat too tight with emotion to speak. In that moment, the invisible thread that connected their lives to the remarkable bear seemed almost tangible, a testament to the profound and mysterious bonds that can form between species when compassion overcomes fear, when understanding transcends difference. The documentary film, later released under the title The Guardian of Blackridge, would go on to win multiple awards and inspire conservation efforts across the country. But its most profound impact was perhaps on those who had experienced the story firsthand. The Reynolds family, James and Emma Thornton, Elena Vasquez, Joseph Running Bear, and the countless members of the Blackridge community who had witnessed something extraordinary in their midst. For them, the forest would never again be simply a collection of trees and wildlife. It had become a place of wonder, a reminder that the natural world holds wisdom and compassion that humans are only beginning to comprehend. And somewhere within its depths, a remarkable bear continued to challenge everything scientists thought they knew about the boundaries between species, teaching her cubs, and by extension all who heard her story, that sometimes the most powerful force in nature is not tooth or claw, but the simple, boundless capacity for compassion. 10 years passed, transforming Blackridge Forest and its surrounding community in ways no one could have predicted that fateful morning when a mother bear found a human baby at a traffic accident. The Blackridge Wildlife Corridor Initiative, born from the Reynolds family's gratitude, had grown into a nationally recognized conservation model. What began as a simple effort to protect one bear's territory had evolved into a comprehensive approach to human-wildlife coexistence that researchers and conservationists from around the world came to study. Noah Reynolds, now 16, had grown into a thoughtful young man with an uncanny connection to the natural world. His earliest memories might not have included the bear who saved his life twice, but the story had shaped his identity in profound ways. While other teenagers focused on sports or video games, Noah spent his weekends volunteering with Elena Vasquez's research team, now expanded into the Blackridge Interspecies Communication Institute. Noah explained to a group of visiting environmental science students from the State University. He stood confidently at the edge of the observation platform that had been constructed at a respectful distance from what had become known as Maples Grove, a rich section of forest where the famous bear's descendants were frequently spotted. More importantly, he continued, his voice carrying the passion of someone who understood the significance of their work, aggressive encounters between bears and humans have decreased by over 80%, despite the population increase. A student raised her hand. But isn't that just because there's more space between them? Less opportunity for conflict? Noah smiled. That's part of it, certainly. But there's something else happening here that's harder to quantify. He gestured toward the dense forest. The bears of Blackridge, particularly those descended from Maple, behave differently around humans. They're cautious, but not fearful. They seem to understand boundaries in ways that bear populations elsewhere don't. The behavioral changes in Maple's lineage had become the focus of Dr. Elena Vasquez's groundbreaking research. Now, in her 50s, Elena had received numerous accolades for her work, including a prestigious MacArthur Genius Grant that had funded the expansion of the Institute. What we're witnessing here is cultural transmission in bears, Elena often explained to skeptical colleagues. Maple somehow developed behaviors that increased successful coexistence with humans, and she taught those behaviors to her cubs. They, in turn, have passed them to subsequent generations. It challenges our understanding of animal cognition and behavioral evolution. Maple herself had passed away 3 winters earlier, at an age considered remarkable for a wild bear. Elena's team had found her in her winter den, surrounded by that season's nearly grown cubs, having died peacefully in her sleep. The news had spread through the community like the loss of a beloved elder, and nearly 1,000 people, locals and visitors alike, had attended a memorial ceremony led by Joseph Running Bear, now in his 90s but still sharp of mind and spirit. She lived as she chose and died as she lived, in freedom and in harmony with the world around her, Joseph had said, his weathered face solemn beneath the ceremonial headdress he wore only for the most sacred occasions. Her spirit remains in these forests, in her descendants, and in the hearts of all who were touched by her story. For the Reynolds family, Maple's passing had hit particularly hard. Lily and Connor had brought a tearful Noah to the ceremony, where he had placed a small carved wooden bear beside the memorial stone that now marked the entrance to the protected grove. "I know, it's silly," Noah had said to Elena afterward, wiping away tears. "I only saw her a handful of times, and she was a wild animal, but it feels like losing family." Elena had squeezed his shoulder gently. "Not silly at all. Connection doesn't always require constant presence. Sometimes it's forged in a single moment so powerful that it echoes throughout a lifetime." Now, 3 years after Maple's passing, her legacy continued to grow in unexpected ways. Her descendants, identifiable by distinctive cinnamon-colored fur and unique behaviors, had spread throughout Black Ridge Forest, creating what researchers called a distinct cultural subpopulation. The most remarkable of these descendants was a female bear the research team had designated BF137, but whom Noah had privately named Willow. Willow was Maple's granddaughter, born to one of her final litters. She had inherited not just her grandmother's distinctive coloring but also her unusual comfort around humans, particularly Noah. Since Noah began working with the research team at 13, Willow had shown an uncanny awareness of his presence, often appearing at observation sites when he was present, occasionally sitting calmly within viewing distance as if attending to the researcher's activities. "It's statistically improbable," Elena had noted after reviewing years of data. "Willow is visible on days when Noah is present approximately 73% of the time, compared to only 29% when he's absent. That's not random chance." This apparent recognition had evolved into what Elena carefully termed voluntary proximity behavior, instances where Willow would deliberately approach observation areas when Noah was present, sometimes bringing her cubs as if to introduce them. The behavior was unprecedented and had become the subject of Elena's most controversial research paper, Transgenerational Recognition Patterns in Ursus arctos, Evidence for Interspecies Memory. The scientific community remained divided on Elena's theories. Some colleagues dismissed her findings as anthropomorphism or statistical anomalies. Others suggested more mundane explanations. Perhaps Noah unconsciously mimicked behaviors or used products that reminded the bears of Maple, triggering familiar associations rather than true recognition. But for the residents of Black Ridge, who had witnessed the extraordinary story unfold over years, the connection between the Reynolds family and the bears of Black Ridge Forest was simply accepted as one of those mysteries that science had yet to fully explain. This acceptance was tested, however, on a crisp autumn day in Noah's 16th year, when the boundaries between human and bear worlds were once again dramatically crossed. The day began like any other Saturday volunteer shift at the research center. Noah arrived early, helping to calibrate monitoring equipment before joining a small team heading to the northern observation post. A film crew from National Geographic was scheduled to arrive the following week to document the unique bear behaviors, and Elena wanted to confirm recent Willow sightings in that sector. Any excuses to get out of calculus homework works for me," Noah joked to Emma Thornton, now 25, and one of Elena's full-time research assistants. Ever since the incident in her father's backyard 13 years earlier, Emma had been fascinated by bears, eventually earning a wildlife biology degree specifically to work with Elena's team. "Just wait until college," Emma laughed, adjusting her backpack as they hiked up the forest trail. "Calculus will seem like a vacation compared to statistical modeling." The research team, Noah, Emma, and 2 graduate students named Marcus and Priya, spent the morning at the observation post without any significant bear sightings. By early afternoon, Elena radioed to suggest they try the eastern ridge, where another team had reported fresh bear signs. "We should head back before dusk," Emma decided after consulting her watch. "It's a longer hike to the eastern post, and I don't want to be on the trails after dark." The team packed up their equipment and set out on the connecting trail, with Emma leading the way. The forest was alive with autumn colors, maples and aspens sporting brilliant red and gold foliage that contrasted with the deep green of the pines. Noah, bringing up the rear of the group, paused occasionally to photograph particularly stunning vistas for the research center's social media accounts. It was during one such pause that Noah heard it. A soft whimper coming from a dense thicket about 20 yards off the main trail. He hesitated, knowing the protocol was to stay together, but the sound came again, distinctly distressed. "Hey guys," he called ahead, "hold up a minute." But the others had rounded a bend in the trail, the sound of their voices fading as they continued without realizing he had stopped. Noah considered jogging to catch up, but then heard the whimper once more, decidedly more urgent. "Just a quick look," he murmured to himself, stepping carefully off the trail. He knew these woods well enough to find his way back, and his radio would allow him to reconnect with the team if necessary. The underbrush thickened as he moved away from the trail, fallen leaves crunching beneath his boots. The whimpering grew clearer, and Noah's heart rate quickened as he recognized the sound. A bear cub in distress. He pushed aside a curtain of wild grapevine and found himself in a small clearing. What he saw made him freeze in place. A young bear cub, probably no more than 8 months old, lay on its side, its hind leg caught in the illegal jaws of a poacher's trap. The cub's fur was a distinctive cinnamon color that Noah immediately recognized. This was one of Willow's cubs. The young bear whimpered again, weakly pulling against the metal teeth that cut into its leg. Blood matted the fur around the wound, suggesting the cub had been trapped for several hours at least. Noah's mind raced through the protocols he'd been taught for situations like this. Back away, report the location, wait for properly trained personnel with tranquilizers and medical equipment. But the cub's condition appeared critical. Shock and blood loss were evident in its glazed eyes and labored breathing. Waiting for a response team might mean the difference between life and death for the young bear. "It's okay," Noah said softly, knowing from experience that his voice could have a calming effect on the bears acclimated to researcher presence. "I'm going to help you." He moved slowly, keeping his voice low and soothing as he approached. The cub watched him with fearful eyes, but was too weak to put up much resistance. Noah examined the trap, a vicious, spring-loaded device that had been banned in the state for decades. Its metal teeth had closed just above the cub's ankle, the heavy chain anchoring it to a nearby tree root. Noah had assisted with similar rescue operations before, though always under supervision. He knew the mechanism required significant force to release, force that risked further injuring the cub if applied incorrectly. But he also knew that every minute counted. Removing his jacket, he draped it gently over the cub's head to reduce its stress and prevent it from biting if pain caused it to lash out. Then, taking a deep breath, he positioned his hands on the spring mechanism and began to apply steady pressure. The trap was rusted and resistant, requiring more strength than Noah had anticipated. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool autumn air as he strained against the unyielding metal. Finally, with a grating sound, the jaws began to separate. One more push and... A low growl from directly behind him froze Noah mid-motion. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end as he realized his critical error. He had focused so intently on the trapped cub that he had forgotten the first rule of bear encounters. Cubs are never alone. Slowly, keeping the pressure on the trap, Noah turned his head just enough to confirm what he already knew. Willow stood at the edge of the clearing, her massive form tense with maternal concern, dark eyes fixed unblinkingly on the human kneeling beside her injured cub. A rush of conflicting emotions flooded Noah. Fear, certainly, at being caught in such a vulnerable position, but also a strange sense of recognition. This was Willow, the bear he had observed countless times, the descendant of the bear who had saved his life. Yet intellectual knowledge offered little comfort when facing 600 pounds of protective mother bear. "Willow," he said softly, his voice shakier than he intended. "It's okay. I'm helping. I'm helping your cub." The bear took a step forward, then another, her movements deliberate and controlled. Noah remained perfectly still aside from maintaining pressure on the trap mechanism. His radio crackled at his belt, Emma likely realizing he was missing, but he didn't dare move to answer it. Willow approached until she was less than 10 feet away, close enough that Noah could smell her wild, musky scent and see the individual hairs of her dense coat ruffling in the light breeze. She made a chuffing sound, head lowering to better observe what Noah was doing to her cub. "I need to open this just a bit more," Noah explained, speaking in the calm, even tone he'd used during countless observation sessions. "Then your little one will be free." Whether Willow understood his words was impossible to know, but something in his voice or actions must have communicated his intentions. The bear settled onto her haunches, watching intently but making no move to interfere. Taking this as permission to continue, Noah refocused on the trap. With a final straining push, the jaws opened wide enough for him to carefully lift the cub's injured leg free. The moment the pressure released, the cub let out a yelp of pain that caused Willow to surge to her feet, a warning growl rumbling from her throat. It's okay," Noah soothed, slowly removing his jacket from the cub's head and backing away. "All done. The trap is off." The freed cub struggled to its feet, limping badly, but able to move. It made a plaintive sound toward its mother, who responded with a soft grunt. Willow approached her cub, gently nuzzling and inspecting the wounded leg. Then she did something that Noah would later struggle to explain to Elena's team. She looked directly at Noah and made a deliberate motion with her head, a movement that seemed undeniably like a nod of acknowledgement. Noah's radio crackled again, Emma's voice now clearly concerned. "Noah? Where are you? Do you copy?" With slow, careful movements, Noah reached for his radio, never taking his eyes off the bears. "I'm okay," he responded quietly. "About 20 yards east of marker 14. I've got a situation here with Willow and one of her cubs. The cub was in a poacher's trap, but I've removed it. The leg is injured, but not broken." There was a moment of stunned silence before Emma's voice returned, tight with tension. "Stay exactly where you are. Do not approach the bears. We're coming to you, slowly. Elena is being notified." "Roger that," Noah replied, then added, "But Emma? I don't think there's any danger. She knows what I did." As if to confirm his assessment, Willow gently nudged her injured cub, guiding it to a patch of soft moss a few yards from Noah. The cub collapsed gratefully, licking at its wounded leg. Willow then did something even more remarkable. She moved to a nearby stream, dipped her paw in the water, and returned to dab at her cub's injury, cleaning away the blood with surprising dexterity. Noah watched in amazement, his scientific training wrestling with what his eyes were witnessing. Bears were known to be intelligent, but this level of apparent problem-solving and wound care challenged conventional understanding of ursine cognition. By the time Emma and the others arrived, moving quietly and cautiously through the underbrush, the scene had grown even more extraordinary. Willow was sitting peacefully about 15 feet from Noah, watching as her cub dozed fitfully on the moss. Another cub, previously unseen, had emerged from the forest to join its sibling, curling protectively around the injured one. "Noah," Emma whispered, her eyes wide as she took in the tableau. "Don't move. I've got a tranquilizer dart ready." "No," Noah responded firmly but quietly. "No tranquilizers. Look at her, Emma. She's calm. She understands." Emma hesitated, the tranquilizer gun half raised. This isn't standard protocol. This is exactly the kind of situation where bears can become unpredictable. Maple's descendants aren't standard bears, Noah insisted. "You know this. Trust me." The standoff continued for several tense seconds before Priya, one of the graduate students, spoke up. "He's right, Emma. Look at her body language. No signs of aggression. If anything, she appears cooperative." Eventually, Elena herself arrived, alerted by the team's radio communications. Despite being in her 50s, she moved through the forest with the confidence of someone who had spent decades in these woods. She assessed the situation with a researcher's trained eye, taking in the injured cub, the calm mother bear, and Noah's position. "Noah," she said quietly, "I need you to very slowly move toward us. No sudden movements." "I don't think I should," Noah replied, his voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through his system. "I think if I move, it might break whatever understanding we've established here. The cub needs medical attention." Elena considered this, her scientific mind weighing protocol against the unprecedented situation before her. "What are you suggesting?" "Let me call the cub to me," Noah said. "If Willow allows it, I can examine the wound more closely, while you prepare whatever treatment might be needed." It was a radical proposal that violated every safety guideline Elena had established over years of bear research. And yet, the evidence before her eyes suggested that something exceptional was happening, something that might warrant an exceptional response. After a long moment, Elena nodded. "All right, but at the first sign of distress from either bear, we tranquilize and extract you, no arguments." Noah agreed, then turned his attention back to Willow and her cubs. "Hey there," he said softly, directing his words to the injured cub. "Can I take another look at that leg? We can help make it better." To the astonishment of the research team, the injured cub lifted its head at the sound of Noah's voice. More remarkably, Willow made a soft grunting sound that seemed to encourage her offspring. The cub struggled to its feet and limped the short distance to where Noah knelt, collapsing again just within arm's reach. "Unbelievable," Marcus whispered, earning a sharp look from Emma that silenced him immediately. Moving with exquisite care, Noah examined the cub's injury. The trap had created a deep laceration but had miraculously missed major blood vessels and bone. The wound needed cleaning and possibly stitches, but with proper care, the cub would likely recover fully. "Elena," Noah called softly, "we need the medical kit. Disinfectant, antibiotic ointment, and probably some butterfly closures." What followed was perhaps the most extraordinary field treatment in wildlife biology history. Under Willow's watchful gaze, Elena approached slowly with the medical supplies. Together, she and Noah cleaned and treated the cub's wound, applying a bandage that would eventually fall off naturally as the cub moved through the forest. Throughout the procedure, Willow remained calm, occasionally making soft vocalizations that seemed to soothe her injured offspring when the treatment caused discomfort. The second cub stayed nearby, apparently curious about the humans, but following its mother's example of cautious acceptance. "This isn't possible," Priya murmured as they finished the treatment. "Everything we know about wild bear behavior says this shouldn't be happening." "And yet it is," Elena replied, her voice filled with the wonder of a scientist witnessing something that challenged the foundations of her discipline. What Maple began, her descendants continue. A new way of relating to humans that defies our understanding. When the treatment was complete, Noah gently stroked the cub's head, an action that would have been considered suicidally reckless in any other context. "You'll be okay now," he said softly. "The medicine will help you heal." As if understanding it was time to leave, Willow made a distinctive huffing sound. The uninjured cub immediately responded, returning to its mother's side. The injured cub struggled up more slowly, testing its bandaged leg before limping toward Willow. The mother bear rose to her full height, towering over the clearing for a moment as she surveyed the humans who had helped her young. Then, in a gesture that none of the witnesses would ever forget, she briefly raised one paw, held it suspended in the air for a moment before dropping it and turning to lead her cubs into the forest. "Did she just wave goodbye?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena shook her head, not in denial but in amazement. "I don't know what to call it, but it wasn't random." The team watched in silence as the three bears disappeared into the autumn foliage, the only evidence of their extraordinary encounter being the discarded poacher's trap and a few blood-stained bandage wrappers. The incident became known as the Clearing Cooperation in Elena's subsequent research papers, documented with meticulous notes and the limited video footage Marcus had managed to capture on his phone. It represented a paradigm shift in understanding bear cognition and interspecies relationships, a shift that had begun 16 years earlier when a mother bear found a human baby at a traffic accident. The discovery of the illegal trap led to a comprehensive investigation that eventually uncovered a poaching operation targeting multiple species in Blackridge Forest. 3 men were arrested and charged with numerous wildlife crimes, their prosecution becoming a high-profile example of enhanced penalties for poaching in protected habitats. For Noah, the experience solidified his decision to pursue wildlife biology as a career, with a specific focus on interspecies communication and cognition. What happened in that clearing wasn't just about bears learning to tolerate humans, he explained during his college admission interview at Cornell University's prestigious veterinary program. It was about 2 species finding a common language in a moment of need, a language of trust and mutual aid. The story of Blackridge's bears continued to evolve in the years that followed. Willow's injured cub recovered fully, identified in subsequent seasons by the distinctive scar on its hind leg. The research team named it Ember for the spark-like patch of lighter fur near its ear, and it grew into a healthy adult that exhibited the same unusual comfort around human researchers that characterized Maple's lineage. Elena's research garnered international attention, drawing cognitive biologists, animal behaviorists, and even philosophers to Blackridge. The question at the heart of their discussions went beyond science into the realm of interspecies ethics. If some bears could develop cultural traditions of peaceful coexistence with humans, what responsibility did humans have to reciprocate and expand such possibilities? The Reynolds family's Black Ridge Wildlife Corridor Initiative eventually grew into a multi-state conservation network, with similar corridors established in neighboring regions. Connor Reynolds, now in his 50s, had left his architectural firm to work full-time on conservation design, creating structures and communities that facilitated human-wildlife coexistence rather than conflict. Lily's children's book about Maple had spawned a successful series that taught young readers about wildlife conservation through the continuing adventures of the bear family. The books had been translated into 26 languages and had become staples in elementary school environmental education programs across the country. On Noah's 21st birthday, 5 years after the clearing incident, the Reynolds family held a private celebration at the memorial stone-marking Maple's grove. Now a senior at Cornell, Noah had returned home for the summer to work once again with Elena's research team, which had become one of the most respected wildlife behavior programs in North America. "I've been thinking a lot about connectedness lately," Noah said, as the small gathering, his parents, Elena, Emma, Joseph Running Bear, now requiring a wheelchair but still sharp of mind, and James Thornton, shared a sunset picnic near the memorial. Not just the ecological kind we study, but something deeper. He ran his fingers over the smooth surface of the carved wooden bear he had placed at the memorial years earlier, now weathered but still recognizable. "When I was trapped in that car as a baby, and when I was with Willow and her cub in the clearing, those weren't just random moments, they were, I don't know how to describe it. Resonances," Joseph offered, his wizened face peaceful in the golden light of sunset. Moments when the boundaries between beings become thin, allowing something essential to pass between them. "Exactly," Noah nodded gratefully. "Science gives us tools to study these connections, but not always the language to fully describe them." As the conversation continued, a movement at the forest edge caught Noah's attention. There, partially obscured by the lengthening shadows, stood a large cinnamon-colored bear with a distinctive scar on its hind leg. Ember, now fully grown, watched the gathering with the same calm curiosity that had characterized its grandmother. Noah didn't point out the bear to the others, respecting the moment of private connection. Instead, he simply raised his hand in a small gesture of acknowledgement. The bear remained still for several heartbeats, then mirrored the gesture with a slight lift of its paw before melting back into the deepening twilight of the forest. In that silent exchange was encoded all that had come before. The accident that had first connected a bear and a human infant, the years of research and conservation that had followed, the extraordinary encounter in the clearing, and countless smaller moments of recognition and respect between species traditionally separated by fear and misunderstanding. The story of the mother bear who found a human baby at a traffic accident had evolved into something far greater than a single remarkable rescue. It had become a testimony to the possibility that compassion might be a universal language, one capable of bridging the most ancient divides, even those between humans and the wild creatures with whom they share the earth. As darkness fell over Black Ridge Forest, the boundaries between species, between science and wonder, between known and unknown, seemed to blur just a little. And in that blurring was a promise that perhaps the most important frontiers yet to be explored were not in distant stars or microscopic realms, but in the space between beings, the space where understanding might grow from the simplest seed, the recognition of another's need, and the choice to help rather than harm. The forest held its secrets close, but it had shared enough to change countless lives, human and bear alike. And somewhere in its depths, the descendants of a remarkable bear continued to carry forward a legacy born in a moment of crisis, a legacy that had put tears in the eyes of everyone who witnessed it, and continued to touch hearts with its simple, profound message. that compassion knows no species, that connection transcends difference, and that sometimes the most unexpected encounters can transform our understanding of what it means to truly coexist. 20 years later, on a golden autumn morning, much like the one when Maple had first found a human baby at a traffic accident, an elderly man made his way carefully down a familiar forest path. Noah Reynolds, now in his 40s, walked with a slight limp, the result of an injury sustained during a conservation expedition years earlier. His face, weathered by decades of outdoor work, creased into a smile as he reached the expanded memorial area that had once been a simple stone marker. Black Ridge National Forest had become the crown jewel of American conservation efforts. Its innovative human-wildlife integration programs replicated across continents. Noah, now Dr. Reynolds, served as the director of the International Center for Interspecies Understanding, headquartered in a stunning facility at the forest's edge that welcomed researchers and visitors from around the world. Today, however, he had come alone, carrying a small bundle wrapped in soft cloth. His annual pilgrimage to Maple's memorial had become a personal tradition, a moment to reconnect with the origins of his life's work and the remarkable series of events that had shaped not just his existence but an entire movement. The memorial had grown over the decades. What began as a simple stone now anchored a tasteful arrangement of natural elements, a circular clearing ringed by native plants, with stone benches positioned for quiet contemplation. At its center stood a life-sized bronze sculpture of a mother bear with 2 cubs, created by a renowned wildlife artist who had been inspired by the Black Ridge story. Beneath it, a simple inscription read, "Maple, Guardian of Black Ridge," who taught us that the greatest wilderness lies not in the forest, but in the spaces between hearts. Yet to connect, Noah settled onto one of the benches, carefully unwrapping the bundle he had brought. Inside was a weather-worn children's book, his mother's original, The Mother Bear's Gift, now a cherished family heirloom. Lily had passed away 5 years earlier after a brief illness, leaving behind a legacy of stories that had inspired a generation of conservationists. Connor had followed her the next year, his heart perhaps too accustomed to beating alongside hers to continue alone for long. "I brought something to share today," Noah said softly, his voice carrying no further than the clearing. He had long ago stopped feeling self-conscious about speaking aloud during these visits. Whether anyone, or anything, listened was less important than the ritual itself. He opened the book to a dog-eared page showing a beautifully illustrated scene of a mother bear helping a baby in a car seat. Though the binding was cracked and the colors had faded with time, the power of the image remained undimmed. "My daughter is expecting her first child next month," Noah continued, tracing the illustration with a gentle finger. "Maple will be her name. Maple Eleanor Reynolds Thornton." He smiled at the thought of his daughter, herself a wildlife veterinarian who had married Emma Thornton's son, carrying forward both the name and the legacy of connection that had begun so improbably decades ago. As Noah sat lost in thought, a movement at the forest edge caught his attention. It had been many years since the bears of Maple's lineage had been regular visitors to the memorial site. The success of the conservation programs meant larger territories and healthier populations, naturally dispersing the bears throughout the expanded protected areas. But there, partially hidden among the vibrant autumn foliage, stood a cinnamon-colored bear. Not Maple, not Willow, not even Ember, all long since passed into forest legend, but perhaps a great-great-grandcub of that first remarkable bear. It watched Noah with the same calm, knowing gaze that had characterized its ancestors, neither threatening nor retreating. "Hello, friend," Noah said softly, remaining seated to appear non-threatening. I was just sharing some family news." The bear tilted its head slightly as if listening. Then, in a gesture that sent a wave of emotion through Noah so powerful he could barely breathe, it raised a paw and held it suspended in the air for a heartbeat before dropping it back to the ground. Tears spilled freely down Noah's weathered cheeks. After all these years, after all the scientific papers and conservation victories and paradigm shifts in our understanding of animal cognition, after everything, the simple gesture still held the power to move him beyond words. "Thank you," he whispered, not bothering to wipe away the tears. "For everything." The bear watched him a moment longer, then turned and disappeared into the forest with unhurried grace, leaving Noah alone with the gentle sounds of wind through autumn leaves. He sat there until the afternoon light began to fade, the tattered book open on his lap, his heart full with the certainty that some connections transcend time and understanding, weaving themselves into the very fabric of existence. What had begun as a moment of crisis, a mother bear finding a human baby at a traffic accident, had rippled outward through decades, changing countless lives and reshaping humanity's relationship with the wild in ways no one could have imagined. As Noah finally rose to leave, gathering his treasured book and taking one last look at the bronze bears gleaming in the late afternoon light, he felt a profound sense of completion. His life had come full circle, from the helpless infant saved by an unlikely guardian to the man who had dedicated his existence to honoring that connection and expanding its lessons to the wider world. The legacy would continue through his daughter and her child, through the bears that still roamed these forests with their inherited wisdom, through the thousands of people whose lives had been touched by the story, and through the land itself. Protected now and forever as a testament to what becomes possible when boundaries dissolve and compassion flows freely between all living beings. Noah made his way back along the forest path as twilight descended, his slight limp barely noticeable as he walked with the lightness of someone who has witnessed something extraordinary. Not just today, but throughout a lifetime, blessed by an improbable connection. Behind him, as darkness settled over Blackridge Forest, the bronze mother bear kept her eternal vigil, her silent form a reminder that sometimes the most profound transformations begin in the most unexpected moments, with the simple, instinctive recognition of another's need and the choice, against all odds and expectations, to help. And somewhere in the darkening forest, real bears settled into their evening routines, carrying in their very being the cultural memory of a singular bear who had, generations ago, made a choice that changed everything, a choice that had put tears in the eyes of everyone who witnessed it and continued to touch hearts with its enduring message, that in our most vulnerable moments our truest nature is revealed, and that nature, at its core, knows compassion beyond bounds.